partners in this work. So really excited to hear from our next speaker.
Well, you know what? Some people were in the room when it happened, and Jim was there. His career has been really stellar. Not only is he the Chief Impact and Investment Officer at Blue Meridian Partners, but he was Deputy Secretary of Education under President Obama and the founding executive director of my brother's Keeper. But more importantly, Jim Shelton has been a partner of mine. He's been an ally in this work. He and I are talking all the time about how we can scale up, go big, solve real problems. He knows these problems exist and knows that we can't tinker around the edges, that we've got to really amass the kind of resources that can go out and fix some of this stuff. But we also have to hold ourselves accountable. We have to make sure that we're delivering clear outcomes that folks believe will make a difference. So I'm really excited to offer Jim an opportunity to address our conference today.
Thanks so much, Jeff. It is actually my honor to be here today. I'm extraordinarily grateful for the opportunity to follow folks like Dr. Wilson. We're at an extraordinary time in this moment, and I was reminded yesterday of the power and potential of being able to be, frankly, hold the dissonance of being deeply grateful for the progress that we have made to this point, and yet completely unsatisfied by the fact that we are not able to say that we have done it for all of our children. As Jeff said at the very beginning, it has unfortunately been baked into our system from the very beginning that our systems of inequity are now designed and in our policies. Whether it was redlining in cities across the country, that we still show up in the matching of the socioeconomic maps that Raj Chetty showed us, or whether there it is in the narratives that our young people hold for themselves about what is for them and what they can do because of the way people look at them and treat them. Like, we have developed a culture in this country that says that some people have it and some people don't. And that is as important to this work as the other structures that are in place that hold people where they are. Despite all the evidence to the contrary, we still have to prove that our young people can do it. And the great news is that our young people do it every day, oftentimes with the help of people like you. Now, as I get into the conversation about how we do what Jeff said and what Connie said, and there's many others, which is move from hundreds or thousands of young people to the millions of young people that we ultimately need to serve. The reality is that we know we need a different kind of infrastructure, different kind of supports, and different ways of working together. But most importantly, we need a different backdrop. If you remember the chart that Raj Chetty showed that said that the reality is that we are now at the point where, instead of in the 1940s, when 90% of people could expect to do better than their parents, we're at the point where now it's at best a 50-50 chance, and that's across all populations. We are also at the point where what is now called the cost of thriving index, the bundle of things that actually is what determines whether or not someone is able to get their education and get their housing and all of the things that make it such that we took for granted in certain parts of our society over time as making for a quality life. It now is at the point where for the median male income, it takes more than a year to earn that much money. Now think about what that means. What that means is that not only has our relative ability to earn more gone down, but what it costs us to even live what we considered a basic lifestyle has gone away. Now I raise all that to say the reason for that is that the reason I raise that is because it's important for us to recognize that that has happened through decisions that we've made. If you follow the second page of Raj's that same chart that he pulled that from, it basically shows that if we had basically distributed income the way we did in the 1940s, instead of falling from 90% of our kids to 50% being able to do better than their parents, it would be 90% to 80%. We think a lot about growth, but the reality is we're making decisions every day that are holding our kids in place. So as we do this work together, it is critically important that we recognize exactly our role in creating the conditions for this work, and that we're doing place-based work in the context of teaching kids to swim upstream. Now, what does that mean? What that means is that we've talked all day about the importance of getting young people to be able to progress through their lives, to cross those milestones from cradle all the way through to career that result in them having thriving adults. We also talked about a little bit less, but we know it's there, helping them to avoid those impediments, whether it's unplanned pregnancy or involvement with the criminal justice system or mental health and addiction issues or exposure to violence or trauma. Being systematic about those things is the way that we're going to help our young people make progress over time. But the reality is that all happens in a context. And the context where you can intervene in people's lives in that way is in their places, the neighborhoods and the regions in which they're in. And that's what we see in those maps. And so it is, yes, about crossing those milestones, but it is also about the context of bias and poverty that surrounds you. It is about your built environment. And do you have housing? And do you have access to transportation to get to the resources that are around you? Are there jobs, and are there good jobs, and are there pathways to those jobs, as Dreama said, that allow you to create opportunity in your community and pursue opportunity and live a life where you can earn an income that lets you take care of your family and yourself? Do you have the public infrastructure in place? Because as we know, for people without resources, it is then the public system that steps in to fill those gaps. And without those resources in place, we recognize that it is impossible for young people to continue to make those steps unless somebody intervenes. It is that combination of things that create the context for our young people to thrive. And yet we know that without our leaning in to create that context, our systems have been failing our young people. So what does this mean? What this means is that the field is already beginning to form with people like you and many others working in place-based partnerships to bring these kind of coherent environments together for our young people, to be able to help them by doing the kind of work that we know actually does two things. One is actually makes a life-changing impact on their lives. Because if you're doing work and it doesn't ultimately change someone's life trajectory, then it's appreciated, but it actually doesn't matter. And if we still only figure out how to do this, but only do it for a small number of children, hundreds instead of thousands, tens of thousands, millions, then not only will we change only a few lives, which each one matters, but what we need to happen as a nation, what we need to heal us as a nation, won't come to pass. So we've talked about it, the need to be more systemic, the need to be more human-centered and center the child and their family and what they need, the need to both emphasize region, but also emphasize neighborhood, the need to be much more intentionally cross-sector, recognizing that the private sector and the public sector and the nonprofit sector have to come together if we want the resources and systems in place to address our young people's needs. That it has to be wired for learning, because as much as we know already, we still have much to learn about how to produce these kind of results consistently, over and over again, for every single child. And as you heard from Sandra, it is also about narrative and culture change. because our young people need to know that something better is for them, that there are new possibilities. Our communities need to know that they have power, and that power can translate into the opportunities to transform not only their own communities, but the lives of their children in it. If we can consistently deliver that, it will be transformative. Now, what we realize, though, is that there have been things that have gotten in the way. You know, I was involved with Promising Neighborhoods early on. I've studied the work of many of you around the country. And the reality is that 5 things have consistently gotten in the way. Number 1, a lack of public sector engagement and leadership. Oftentimes, the CBO community has come together, lots and lots of motion on the and small community-based organizations, and whether it's the mayor's office that doesn't quite lean in, or whether it's public resources that don't quite line up, or whether it's a lack of infrastructure to lean on, unless you get that alignment and engagement and it's sustained, then it's very hard for the NGO community to do this on its own. Similarly, people can all lean in, but if there is not adequate public and private capital, money, resources to make it happen, to sustain the programs, to scale the programs, to fund the infrastructure, to keep people leaning into the work of supporting our children, to keep people leaning into the work of doing the analysis to get this right, we can't get there from here, let alone the dollars to fix the housing and do inclusive growth and all the other things that we know are important. We know this work is complex. If you just take the pieces around data, we need more powerful tools. We need more powerful supports to help communities that are doing this work so that each one is not recreating the wheel. And we know that each field, whether it's the medical field or the legal profession, there are shared principles. We can learn from each other if we start to understand what it actually takes to do this work well, and how we share that more quickly with each other, and how we have standards of practice that we hold each other to in addition to the outcomes that we're pursuing. And we'll talk more about that today. But most importantly, what's come up over and over again is that this work ultimately has to be about shifts in power. That it has to be real and authentic community authority. There have to be real leaders from community engaged in the work, shaping the direction, calling what works and calling what doesn't. And it has to not just be at the level of implementation, it's got to be at the level of strategy and at the level of policy. In the end, this work is about thriving, but it is also about power. Power comes down to the ability to create, limit, or make choices for yourself, for others. We want every individual and every community to feel that power, because that power is indistinguishable from freedom. So we'll share more about how we can come together around building this field, about the investment dollars that can come from the private sector to support the work, about the conversations we should be having with the administration right now about the way they can shape their policies to support and encourage and catalyze this work, about the conversations that have to be happening in community and between us to get the work to move forward. We'll also talk about what it's going to take to create the context for this work to be successful, even when executed at its best. So with that, I want to thank everyone for this special opportunity to talk to you, but in particular, the Harlem Children's Zone team and Jeff Canada in particular for his mentorship and support throughout this entire work. It has been an honor, and it will be an honor to do this good work together. Thank you.